You're watching NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Hot Mike Show. I'm Bill Whittle, coming to you live from Los Angeles, and unfortunately, Hot Mike can't be here today. He's actually pretty upset. Turns out his father took his T-Bird away, so he's in his room talking to Barbara Ann about going on a surfing safari or something. In any event, he's completely shut down, and we hope to have him back by tomorrow. Today's topic is gun control for infants. Well, what do we mean by gun control for infants? Are we talking about keeping guns out of the hands of little tiny children? No, that's a common sense thing that every one of us knows how to do. If you're watching this show or a member of the NRA, you know pretty much how to keep guns away from children. So when I say gun control for infants, I'm talking about the whole idea of gun control regarding adult infants, primarily on the left. Here's an infantile reaction you might find amusing. A professor named Charles K. Smith, he's a geography professor at San Antonio College, showed up in class in body armor and a ballistic helmet in order to protest the new campus carry law that was enacted in Texas. Here's what Charles K. Smith had to say. "I was just saying I don't feel safe," said Smith, referring to the campus carry law. "It increases the chances of something happening. Used to, when they got mad at me, they had to go home and get the gun and they had time to cool off, but now they'll just have it with them." So my first response to that is, geez, Mr. Smith, I had no idea that geography could be so contentious, frankly. So what else did we happen to hear him say? He's basically, what he's saying is that the students, if he's wearing body armor now, and he wasn't wearing it before, but now there's a concealed carry law, so he doesn't feel safe now. The students are the same. So what I don't understand is, how come he's more likely to be shot now than he was the day before the law took place? What's changed? Are you saying that the kind of people who would not bring a gun to campus unlawfully because it's a crime are the kind of people that are now suddenly going to start murdering people because carrying the gun is no longer a crime? Is that what that means? I don't really understand. I'm just trying to work this through one more time here. Here's Charles Smith, and he's got a classroom of people. And Texas passes a concealed carry law that allows students to carry guns on campus. So far, so good. He shows up after this law is passed in body armor and a ballistic helmet because he says he doesn't feel safe anymore. But with the same students in his class, he doesn't feel safe now because people can legally carry guns to campus when they couldn't legally carry guns to campus before. And now that carrying guns to campus is legal, then that means people will be much less likely to not commit murder. They'll be much more likely to murder people now that they can legally bring their guns to campus. Is that basically it? I think I've got it now. Yes, it's starting to get clear to me now. Since students can now legally bring guns to campus, they're much more likely to murder people because prior to the concealed carry law being passed, bringing guns to campus was against the law. Okay, Mr. Smith, that body armor may actually save you in a situation like this. Not going to save any of your students if somebody decides to open up because of some part of geography that they may be found a little bit contentious. However, you should pray as we do that if somebody does decide to start arguing with you about geography in a violent manner, that one of your students will now be carrying a weapon, concealed weapon, legally and professionally, even if they're not professional policemen, because that's the only way there's going to be of stopping a shooter and protecting all the people who aren't wearing body armor to class today. By the way, he just have to close this. He said, just back into Mr. Smith, he said, "My assumption is that you will have more people carrying guns, and that will lead to problems. It always has." Here's the thing, Mr. Smith. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, you could buy a gun every Walmart in the country, at every Target store, whatever. You could buy one at a hardware store. You didn't have to go to a gun store. Your guns were for sale everywhere. Every high school, forget college, every high school had shooting clubs, and they'd often shoot down in the basement for target practice. Guns were everywhere 50 years ago, everywhere. And we didn't have these problems. You know why? Because what wasn't here 50 years ago was progressive political policies that are so soft on criminals and that are so lenient towards murder and so unwilling to offend people by enforcing the law that now people feel like they have to carry a handgun with them everywhere, which is their right, of course, but which was not really a necessity back before people like you started monkeying around with things like law and order and cause and effect and getting the victim and the perpetrator backwards. So just clear up a little bit of that history. Now, this story got a little bit of coverage, and one of the places it got coverage, surprise, 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 was on The View, which, if you don't know, is a coven of liberal harpies who basically meet once a day to contrive some new form of fantastical unlikelihood. So Whoopi Goldberg picked up this story, but then something interesting happened because once Whoopi Goldberg picked up the story, you've got to watch this epic takedown by the new co-host on The View, Jedediah Bila. Take a look at this.
May not be as such good news because community college students in Texas are now able to carry guns on campus and into classrooms. And should people be worried about this, or is it a smart thing, or what do you think?
I actually love this story. I'm not a gun owner. I spend a lot of time with gun owners. I spent a lot of time in Texas. And when you study these shootings, what you find out is that a lot of these lunatics, these maniacs, target gun-free zones. The Aurora shooter who went in and shot up that movie theater, that Batman movie, he went and specifically went out of region because all of the theaters around him that were closest to him, people were allowed to carry, they were concealed carry. They were allowed to have their firearms. He went to a theater that had a sign out front that declared that it was a gun-free zone. You see it all the time. I mean, there's stats upon stats. The Crime Prevention Research Center came out with a stat that over 98% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. So I want those students who have a license to carry, who have gone through the process, who have been approved, to not be sitting ducks in those classrooms.
Can we just talk about that?
Gone through which process?
They're licensed. They have a gun license.
Yes, but you do know that to get a gun license, you don't have to actually learn how to shoot the gun.
You just to get a gun license?
Yeah.
Everyone I know who has a gun license has gone through extensive
maybe they're from Jersey.
You may have done it, but I'm telling you,
Jersey has good.
People can go and buy guns and never ever have to go to a gun range. They can have them in the house.
First of all, notice that Whoopi Goldberg does not refute or even address her entire point, which was gun-free zones are in fact murder magnets rather than murder protection zones. But here's what's interesting about this: Whoopi says that you can just go ahead and buy a gun for a concealed carry permit and not know how to use it. You know what's funny about that? There's Whoopi talking about her Second Amendment rights, and she's using her First Amendment rights when she doesn't really know how to use it, because even though Whoopi is completely wrong, she's entitled to be wrong. She's entitled to get the facts wrong. That's not using your First Amendment rights correctly, in my opinion. However, the fact remains that this isn't indeed the case. Anyone can own a gun in this country if you're not a felon. In California, and that's a pretty restrictive state, we have to be able to, we have a 10-day cooling off period, a background check, and we have to be able to show that we can clear a round from a semi-automatic pistol with the magazine removed, because apparently a large number of accidents are caused by people putting a magazine into a semi-automatic pistol, cocking the pistol, dropping the magazine out, and thinking that the gun is empty when in fact there's a round in the chamber. And we all know this. I had to do that in order to take the gun home 240 hours after I ordered it. However, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what the story's about. That's not what the situation in Texas is about. That's not what Jedediah was talking about. And everybody knows that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is a concealed carry permit. And in Texas, which is where this event took place, the concealed carry permit is required. You have to have classroom instruction. You have to have instruction on the range in order to get the concealed carry license. So she's just flat out wrong. And needless to say, while you're going through these procedures, every single instructor in the state of Texas is urging you to get as much training as possible and get it as frequently as possible, which everybody who sensibly owns a weapon knows to be just basic common sense, which is in such dire shortage here in the People's Republic of California and in New York, and apparently in San Antonio, Texas as well. Now, one of the people that made that concealed carry law on campus possible is the kind of activist who really has dedicated her life to this. Although she comes from an unlikely place, as most of us do. I was a writer of screenplays, and next thing you know, I'm here talking about America. Sometimes the need just calls us, and we either answer or we don't. Right, Antonia Okafor, friend of the NRA, friend of freedom from quite a while now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I definitely agree.
What was it that got you not only to say, hey, maybe I'm wrong about guns, or maybe I'm not wrong about all of this, but now I'm going to speak about it, and then eventually become basically an activist? Your site, Empower, is, did I get that right? Empowered, sorry.
Yeah,
Empowered is all about gun rights for women. You, I guess, kind of like me, as I said, you kind of fell into this, didn't you?
Absolutely. And really, I was a public policy graduate student at the University of Texas at Dallas, and campus carry was once again being debated. It was a state legislative year when they're in session. And I finally got to the point where I was like, well, for it to make sense, really, it's that we have bad policies that are not working. You know, I was definitely part of the women's movement when it comes to groups that were talking about female empowerment. And all I would hear about is all the sexual assault that was happening on college campuses. And as a, sexual assault survivor myself, it happened when I was a lot younger. I not only was empathetic for those who had gone through it, but I didn't want that to happen to me. And I wanted some type of protection. But yet the only way that the school was going to protect me was if I had basically a rape whistle they gave me for an orientation. And then, yes, those usually broken campus police buttons in the parking lot, which I knew they were not going to be sufficient to help me. So I realized that it really was a woman's issue, and that instead of being a victim, I wanted to be empowered. And that's why I started Empowered later on, because really women are going to be the face of the student movement when it comes to campus carry.
Well, you have been not only a tireless champion of these rights, but an extremely effective one, extraordinarily effective one. And in the article where we saw the story about Mr. Smith, Professor Smith, you had a response that I thought was spot on. Let me just read it to you. Smith's actions, quote, show an irrational hysteria in regard to gun rights on college campuses perpetrated by the anti-gun left. It's a great sentence, Antonia, and the part I like the most is irrational hysteria. I'm calling this segment today Gun Control for Infants, because there are people on the left who have an irrational, hysterical, infantile, knee-jerk reaction to this issue, and a knee-jerk reaction to the object. There's just the fact that we discussed, now this guy's more likely to be killed by his students because he said something outrageous about geography, because legally now people can carry weapons in the classroom. I think murder's still against the law. What is it, do you think, that makes people on the left so hysterical and so irrational and so infantile about all this?
Well, I think the funny thing, too, is that, ironically, he's basically saying that these law-abiding students didn't have a gun when it was illegal, but now they have a gun because it's legal. I think that it just goes to show that these students that he's so afraid of, they're not the ones that he should be afraid of. The ones that he should be afraid of and should have always been afraid of are the criminals who are not going to follow the law. I think it's just elementary and basic. And also with UT Austin, the federal judge just a couple weeks ago basically threw out the case where 3 professors wanted to use the First Amendment to be their a right to basically not have Second Amendment rights on campus, saying that it would impede upon them if they wanted to talk about controversial topics. Well, let's look at places that already allow firearms and also continuously have heated conversations all the time, like, let's say, the legislative body or, other different places like that. I mean, there are definitely other places that you can have topics and talk about conversations that people are not going to like and be upset about and be heated. And yet these law-abiding citizens still have managed not to take their gun out and shoot someone else because it's not the law. So I just, there's no rationale to it. It's really, and also I realized too that when I'm educating these students about it, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be on my side because they realize it's common sense. It makes sense for an adult to be able to use that and then go through all the checks that they have to, and then have that right to be able to have it on campus just like they do off campus.
Exactly. Exactly. And by the way, if you're dealing with students who say they can use their First Amendment right to abolish the Second Amendment right, then they don't really understand rights at all, do they? So here's the issue, Antonia. The left feels that now that you're allowed to carry a gun, things are more dangerous. But before, there was a law saying you couldn't carry a gun on campus, so things were safer. So if it's a question of obeying the law, why doesn't the university, San Antonio College, put up "This is a no murder zone"? Why don't they just put "This is a no murder allowed zone" signs all across the campus, big ones, so that everybody can read it, and put "No murder allowed on this college campus," post them everywhere, and then I think probably the problem will be solved, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's just the same thing like with The View with Whoopi. You bring up that type of statement and that logic, then they'll go to a different topic because they know absolutely it's ludicrous that they have no really logical reasoning behind it. They just want it to be about, let's try and demonize these people who want to carry a firearm and who have gone through the process like they're supposed to. Let's demonize them. I mean, even The Trace a couple of weeks ago had this article where they're demonizing law-abiding citizens and saying that the NRA is trying to make it that that these concealed carry holders are better than the public. Well, they don't have to do that because stats have shown over and over again, particularly in Texas, that versus the general public, yes, they are actually a lot more responsible, and they're a lot less likely to commit any violent crime. So, but they refuse to show the facts when it comes to that. They wanted to make it about emotions. I find it also ironic that that professor, he got that body armor from his son, who is a military vet. And I think it's funny because, not really that funny, but ironic in the fact that the most passionate people when it came to campus carry, the ones who would email me and say they were all in and they want to help me, were the people who were vets, who served in the military, who fought for our right to have the Second Amendment here on and off campus. So I just think it's ironic because those are the people who actually serve and who are the ones who are most grateful for campus carry.
Yeah, I think the emotional driver for the left, and the reason people on the left get so hysterical about this, is because they believe that if you can control the gun, you can control the murder, which we know isn't true, but you can control the gun. They think it's within their control when the gun is not the problem at all. It's murder and insanity that's the problem. And when we come back after this quick 2-minute break with our friend Antonia Okafor, we're going to talk about the fact that the people on the left and people who do these things like bring body armor to campus and so on are unable, they are psychologically incapable of understanding the idea that there are, in fact, predators out there, and this is more than they can handle. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mic Show. We'll be back in 2 minutes.